Chapter 16, The Devil. Friends gathered here tonight, 18th of December, 1972, the 10th year of Aquarius. We enter into the second part of our dissertations. Much has been said about the devil, much has been written on the theme, but few are the ones who have really explained him. The origin of this myth has to be found in the initiatic crypts of the past and in the archaic caverns. Let us reflect for a moment on what the sun is. Unquestionably, the king star illuminates us and gives us life. However, it contrasts with the dark forces. Any midday, however sunny it might be, has its shadows, whether it be below the luxuriant trees of the solitary street, whether it be within the grottos of the mountains, or the simply behind any mobile or immobile body. Each of us project our shadow, here, there, and everywhere. Light and shadow in a harmonious antithesis point out a complete dualism whose extraordinary synthesis is wisdom. Let us now go a little further, a little deeper into the profound, the unknowable of our being. We know that beyond the body, the affections, and of the mind, is the internal divine logoi, unquestionably that which is ineffable, that which is real, projects its own reflection, its own shadow within ourselves, here and now. Undoubtedly, the inner sun of each of us also has its shadow, and the latter fulfills its specific mission in the depth of our own consciousness. Obviously, such a shadow, such a logical reflection is the psychological trainer, Lucifer, the tempter. In the psychological gymnasium of human existence, a trainer is always required with the purpose of educating powers, faculties, extraordinary virtues, etc., etc. In what manner could virtue spring forth from us if temptation did not exist? Only through the struggle, the contrast, the temptation, and rigorous esoteric discipline can there spring forth in us the flowers of virtue. The devil, then, is not that tenebrous personage created by the dogmatism of some dead sects and against which the Marquis of Marville threw all his anathemas. The devil is also not that fabulous entity that deserves a pardon, as was written by Giovanni Papini in his famous book titled The Devil. This compassionate author was excommunicated. We all know very well that Giovanni Papini was the Vatican's spoiled child. However, he was disqualified in the time of Pius X, I guess the fifth. Or no, that's Pius, whatever X is in the Roman numerals. So, ladies and gentlemen, Satan, Lucifer, the devil, is something beyond all of this. He is the reflection of our own inner being, in ourselves and within our own consciousness, here and now. Revising ancient mythologies of ancient times, we come to clearly evidence that such a satanic myth was divulged in all corners of the world by the priests of heliocentric or heliocentric religion, which before were definitely universal. Let us remember that there were eras in the past where everywhere in all places of the planet Earth temples were built to the sun and to the dragon. In those times, there existed dragonian cults, and the priests of said universal religion called themselves children of the dragon, or simply considered themselves dragons. The symbol of the dragon was taken from those gigantic flying reptiles that existed in the area of Atlantis and Lemuria. It is interesting that such a symbol is used to allegorize every shadow of the sun, every reflection of the king's star, including the inner individual Lucifer for each human being. In the Egypt of the pharaohs, the midday sun, the sacred absolute sun, was always symbolized by Osiris, while his shadow, his reflection, his Lucifer, is found allegorized by Typhoon. In the Greek mysteries, the spiritual sun, the Christmas star, the creating demiurge, was always represented by Apollo, while his shadow, his Lucifer, his Satan, his divine reflection is definitely allegorized by Python. In the eclipse of St. John, the shining Christ sun is always found symbolized by Michael, the warrior divinity, while his cosmic shadow is personified by the red dragon. In the Middle Ages, the Logos is allegorized with the personality of St. George, while his shadow is symbolized by the dragon. Let us observe what Bel and the dragon are, the sun and its shadow, day and night. The devil, then, is not that personage that some dead sects have seated on a throne of ignominy to frighten the weak. With just reason, Goethe placed in the mouth of his god that phrase with which the divinity addressed Mephistopheles, quoting, "Of all of your species, genius rebels to my rule. The least harmful and prejudicial is you." Unquote. Much has been said about the satanic myth, and some assume that the latter arrived in the Western world from the land of Egypt. We do not deny in any just says M, the something arrival of many solar, in any something, the arrival of many solar gods to the land of the pharaohs, with their corresponding dragons coming from the Hindustani. We also do not deny that the allegory of Osiris and Typhoon could have been represented in Old Europe. However, let us go further. We have the right to think about the Hyperboreans and their solar cults, along with their dragons and hells. It was not pre-Vedic India exclusively the only one that sent their solar god and the cults to them. It says, beyond all doubt submerged, Atlantis, also left in the country of Sais and on the banks of the Nile, archaic cults to the sun and his dragons. To overcome the dragon, to kill the dragon, is urgent when one wants to be swallowed by the serpent, when one wishes to become a serpent. This means coming out of triumphant from all the temptations offered by the dragon, to come out victorious, to eliminate the ego, to disintegrate all the psychic aggregates that constitute the ego, to reduce to cosmic dust all the memories of desire, etc., etc. Indubitably, after having been devoured by the serpent, we become transformed into serpents. Later, the ego, the third logos, the arch hierophant, and the arch magus, our real being, the secret master, swallows the serpent then we are converted into plumed serpents, into the Mexican Quetzalcoatl, into the Mahatma, and the work is carried out. On arriving at these transcendental heights of the being, to these inner reevaluations, the reflection of the Logos, his own shadows within ourselves, the devil, returns to the Logos. It fuses with him because in the depths he is, and it actually doesn't say what he is here. So this is a little bit of a faulty PDF. Question, Master. If I should forget even the memories of desire, which stimulus will I utilize for my work in the lit forge of Vulcan? Answer. With the greatest pleasure, I will answer this question that comes from the audience. The sacred scriptures affirm in an emphatic manner that first is what is animal and then what is spiritual. Indubitably, when the work in the forge of the Cyclops begins, desire is needed. Uste in Sanskrit, because the profound reevaluations of the being have not yet been carried out. It would be impossible to demand from beginners the Maituna, transcendental sexology, sex yoga, or Kundalini yoga without the radical exclusion of desire. However, later on, with the dissolution of the psychological I, it is unquestionable that such a factor, desire, becomes unnecessary. Motive. Once all animal, subconscious, infraconscious agents are eliminated, desire cannot exist radically. On arriving at these transcendental heights of the being, we can work in the ninth sphere exclusively with the force of Eros, with the power of the sexual hydrogen Si-12, with the transcendental electricity of the zoosperms. In this manner, my friends, in the last instant, desire is not indispensable for the work in the lit forge of Vulcan. Question. Master, Satan being the reflection of God and therefore Satan being love, is it not incongruent to say that the ego is satanic? Answer. Distinguished gentlemen, friends, ladies, remember that there exist two types of darkness. The first we will call the darkness of silence, and of the august secret of the wise men. The second we will call it the darkness of ignorance and of error. This means that the darkness is bipolarized, and that the negative is only the unfoldment of the positive. By simple inductive or inductive logic, I invite you to comprehend that Prometheus Lucifer, chained to a rough rock, sacrificing himself for us, subjected to all the tortures, although he is the marker of the balance, the giver of light, the measure and the weight, the guardian of the seven mansions, that lets through only those who have been anointed by wisdom, that carry on their night the lamp of Hermes, inevitably unfolds into the fatal aspect of the egotistical multiplicity, into those sinister psychic aggregates that constitute our I and which have been duly studied by Buddhist tantric esotericism. With this explanation, gentlemen, I consider that you have understood my works. Question. Master, if the practice of the Maituna Yoga existed from time immemorial, why in Vedanta India are complex erotic stimuli open to the public eye as bas reliefs on the temples themselves? It seems to me that those stimuli make the practice of the Maituna even more difficult. Answer. With great pleasure, I will answer the question of the distinguished esotericist gentleman with which he has formulated with complete clarity. Certainly in the Hindu Kama Kalpa there appears a tantric photograph of a sacred sculpture existing in an ancient temple. I want to refer now in an emphatic manner to such a work of sexual magic. If we carefully observe the photograph of the mentioned Hindu book, we will see a woman in Siddhasana. Her head is found facing downwards, her legs upwards, with the extraordinary part being that these are not found in the lotus position, but rather are open from right to left, even though the knees are bent, so that the inferior parts of the legs are horizontal. The head is supported by the hands and arms, as this sacred asana is known to be in the world of yoga. The most interesting is the following. A magician, practically seated between her legs with the phallus forcibly introduced within the uterus, practices the maituna. Indubitably, such a tantric woman cannot sustain herself in such a position with her head facing down if two more women do not help at her right and left. There one can clearly see a pair of young women helping to support the body of the female yogi. Those half-naked auxiliary women feel terrible lust, and this can be clearly seen in their eyes. The magician enjoys himself caressing the breasts of one and then of the other, while he maintains his phallus connected to the feminine yogi. Indubitably, this complicated and difficult tantric practice among four persons is unnecessary and is totally rejected by the universal white brotherhood. It is not superfluous to remind the audience that these complicated sexual practices carried out by more than two persons certainly correspond to Black Tantrism, and this can be evidenced when we study the sinister teachings of the Dagdugpa clan in the Church of the Priests of the Red Hats in the region of the Him in Oriental Tibet. It is obvious that the adepts of the Yellow Church, white tantrists, or the true Urvareta, Urdarveta. No, I still didn't. Urdvareta or Davareta yogis only practice the Sahaja Maituna according to the mandates of the Gnostic Church, which is sexual union of husband and wife in legally constituted homes. In this way, then, the sexual acts of Maituna among more than two persons has been illustrated in the Kama Kalpa, is unquestionably black magic. Obviously, left Tantrism is different from white Tantrism. And this illustration from the Kama Kalpa is manifestly sinister and tenebrous. It could never be accepted by the white Tantra initiation of the Yellow Buddhist Church. There is no doubt that the multiple asanas of black tantric persons, instead of awakening the kundalini or sacred prana to make it ascend through the spinal canal, stimulate and develop the abominable kunda. This is not the kunda buffer. This is kundarati guardor organ. Then transforming the aspirant into a tenebrous personality, into a black magician of the worst type. We are familiar with the Kama Sutra and the Kama Kalpa. Unfortunately, the former has been adulterated in a shameful manner for it to have a circulation in the Western world, and regarding the later, this has been tainted by black tantras or sadhanas of the Bons and Dugpas. Let my affirmations be corroborated, let them be clearly verified through previous study of Buddhist canons and occult secret books in subterranean crypts of Central Asia. However it might be, since I am an adept and I am in direct contact with the masters of the White Lodge, such as K.H., Morya, Hilarion, etc., and so on, it is clear that I can make these clarifications in a completely conscious and precise manner. Question: Master, how can we differentiate when Lucifer is acting in us and when it is ego acting in us? With great pleasure, I will answer your question. We have talked clearly about the Luciferian super darkness and about the infra-darkness of ignorance and error. Lucifer the tempter, the great trainer of the psychological gymnasium of existence, works tempting us, and these internal impressions tend to polarize negatively or fatally through egotistical activity. Indubitably, only through serene self-reflection and profound internal meditation can we make a clear differentiation between inner, direct Luciferian impressions and bestial, egotistical impressions. Normally, people with a sleep consciousness are not duly prepared to make such a differentiation of impressions. This requires much psychological training. Question: Master, the devil is always allegorized with the trident. Does this symbol have some special significance? Answer: This question from the audience reminds me of the trident that is used by the Brahmans of India and Pakistan. However, we can go further. We arrive at the three primary forces of the universe allegorized by the trident. It is clear that by overcoming the dragon, we can crystallize within ourselves these three forces, and then we can immediately become true solar gods. Is not the dragon the reflection of the sun? Comprehend, then, what the trident means. Question: Dear Master, when one works with Lucifer in the ninth sphere to eliminate ego, are we doing it with the positive as well as negative forces of Lucifer? Distinguished gentlemen, ladies, obviously Lucifer is a ladder to descend and a ladder to ascend, and a force to work and dissolve the ego in a laboratory of sexual alchemy. In the laboratory of sexual alchemy. Unquestionably, only through the Luciferic force can we reduce to ashes the negativity, the negative crystallizations of our psyche, the infrahuman elements, the psychic aggregates, unhappy deviations of the Luciferic force. In this way, friends, the transcendental fohat, the sexual electricity, the marvelous force of the Christus or Christus Lucifer redeems, works, disintegrates everything that is useless with the goal of liberating the essence, the conscience, the Buddhata.